Welcome back from Paris. The Fed won't be able to stop the coming inflation wave. The next inflation wave is already forming. And this time, the real question is not whether the Fed sees it coming, it does. The question is whether the Fed can actually stop it without breaking something else. That is the part that most people are missing. We've already had the first part of an oil shock. We've already talked about how an oil shock moves through the system. Oil goes up, fuel goes up, shipping goes up, manufacturing goes up, food costs go up, and eventually it reaches your wallet. That process is already in motion. So today, I don't want to re explain the whole inflation chain again. The bigger issue now is what happens next. Because as prices start to rise again, the Fed is going to face a very different problem than it faced in the past inflation cycles. Normally, when inflation rises, the Fed raises interest rates. That is the basic playbook, making borrowing more expensive, slow down demand, cool the economy, bring inflation down. And sometimes that works. Usually that works. If inflation is coming from people borrowing too much, spending too much, and bidding prices higher, then raising rates can slow that down. But that's not the problem we're looking at now. The inflation pressure is coming from costs. Oil, diesel, shipping, food production, fertilizer, utilities, insurance, supply chains. That matters because rising interest rates does not create more oil. It certainly won't lower jet fuel costs or reopen shipping lanes. It doesn't make fertilizer cheaper, and it doesn't make farms cheaper to operate, nor does it make groceries cheaper to produce. So the Fed can weaken demand, but it cannot actually fix the source of the inflation, higher oil prices. That's the problem. The Fed can slow the economy down, but the slowing the economy down does not automatically bring supply costs back down. And if prices are rising because the cost of producing and moving goods is rising, then the Fed has a much harder job because now it's not just fighting inflation. It's fighting inflation by putting pressure on an economy that's already fragile. And that's where the debt problem comes in. In the 1970s and early 80s, the Fed eventually crushed inflation by raising interest rates aggressively. It was brutal. Inflation ran into the double digits, 14% as a matter of fact, and the prime rate eventually went to 21%. Borrowing became extremely expensive. Housing got hit, businesses got hit, consumers got hit. But today, the system's carrying a much bigger debt load. The government has massive debt, $39 trillion worth. Consumers have more debt, as do businesses also. The housing market's extremely sensitive to mortgage rates. Banks are sensitive to rate shocks. The federal government is already paying enormous interest costs just to service the debt, just to pay the interest on the debt that we already have, on the $39 trillion. The cost of paying the interest on the US debt costs 15% of the federal budget right now. That's before Social Security, Medicare, and the military are paid. That's one out of every $7 spent by the government is going to pay interest on the debt. So when the Fed raises interest rates now, it doesn't just slow down consumers and businesses, it also makes it more expensive for the government to finance itself. This is a very different setup. Higher rates may help fight inflation, but higher rates also increase pressure on the deficit, housing, banks, consumers, and businesses. So the Fed's boxed in. It raises rates too aggressively, it breaks something. If it doesn't raise it enough, inflation will stick around longer. And that's the trap. We've never been here before. We've never had a $39 trillion debt deficit before, the size of the GDP of America. Inflation on one side and a fragile economy on the other, and massive debt on the other. And you and I are stuck in the middle. Because families are not starting from zero this time. They're starting after the COVID inflation wave, which left prices somewhere between 20 and 30% higher, a huge number. Prices are already reset significantly higher. Groceries, rent, insurance are already 20 to 30% higher. Utilities are higher, car payments are higher, credit card balances are higher. So another inflation wave does not hit a healthy household budget. It hits families that are already stretched. That's why inflation rate, even of just 3, 4, or 5%, can feel terrible right now. because it's stacked on top of the last price shock. Uh, if the oil gets to $150 a barrel from the 110 that it's at right now, we may actually see 20 to 30% inflation through the entire wave, like we did with COVID. And that would be really dramatic. And this is what people actually feel. They feel the grocery bill going up, even right now. They feel the gas at the gas pump obviously is going up, and they feel every basic expense taking a bigger piece of their income. And that's why planning matters right now. Not panic, planning. Because the mistake people make is waiting until everyone admits inflation is back. By then, businesses have already raised their prices and food producers have already adjusted. Retailers have already reset pricing. Once that happens, the prices don't go down where they were. They become the new normal. That's the danger here. They may not be one giant spike overnight, aside from the gas prices. It may be slower than that. Groceries a little higher, then a little higher again. Utilities higher, everyday goods higher, and then higher again. And then one day people look around and realize their budget doesn't work the way it used to. And that's how these waves hit. And right now, slowly at first, and then once in your wallet. So what should you expect? Expect higher prices to stick longer than politicians and economists want to admit. Expect the Fed to talk tough, but move very carefully. Expect the rate cuts to become harder if inflation starts moving back up, which it is. And expect the economy to feel squeezed from both sides, which it's going to be. Higher prices on one side, higher borrowing costs on the other. And if the Fed tries to fight this hard, recession risks rise. But the Fed doesn't fight it hard enough, inflation stays. That's not a clean choice. This is a trap. And that's why this next inflation wave matters so much. Not because the Fed doesn't see it coming, but because this time the Fed may not have a clean way to stop it. The Fed can fight inflation, but this time fighting inflation may mean risking recession, housing weakness, banking stress, and a deeper government debt problem. And when prices reset higher again, it's you and I who are the ones who pay for it. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us with the algorithm, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you.